Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for tuning into this live. This is a pre-recorded interview that was done, and today we'll be showing this interview to you live. And if you're watching it, you can also share it so that others can be a part of it. Welcome to News Guyana 24, and today we will be speaking with someone who will provide us with some information, and you will be informed in terms of the topic that we will be talking about. So, with no further ado, I'm going to bring him on screen and so that we can start this conversation. Also, I want to thank you guys for tuning in and sure to share this live and so that others, like I said, can be informed and also educated about this topic that we're about to get into. So, with no further ado, I would like to bring this individual on air in so that he can introduce himself and then we will take it from there. Thank you. Go ahead here. Hi, good afternoon, Joel. How are you doing today?
Hi, good day, Dunstan. Thank you for having me.
Okay, and you're welcome. And also, I want to thank you for being a guest here on this show, News Guyana 24. And as you know, I guess we've been doing a lot of interviews. So I am more than happy to have you here on this show, and so that we can have this conversation that we consider to be very important or information that individuals might not be aware of. So, with no further ado, so during the election, we know a lot of promises were made in respect to this group and so forth. So my job here as a journalist is to keep this administration honest and also just to ensure that they keep up on their promises. So that is what we want to talk about today, and we also want to bring it to light in so that some actions can be done based on what you guys were able to discuss and so forth during the elections, because we know that it was a busy time, lots of promises were made, but now we have the administration, which is going to be a new administration, obviously the old one, that is continuing. But a lot of promises were made, and this is one of the issue in respect to those promises, and we are going to have the discussion about that. Thank you guys for listening as we get into this discussion, and don't forget to share the live too as well. So, with no further ado, I will ask Joel to give us a background in respect to this organization called SASOD. Go ahead, Joel.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dustin, and thanks again for having me. So, I'm Joel Simpson. I'm the Managing Director of SASOD Guyana. And SASOD Guyana is an over 22-year-old human rights organization and movement leading change, educating, and serving communities to end discrimination based on sexuality and gender in Guyana. And we do that through three key programs that we have. The first being our human rights program, which is focused on advocating for human rights for LGBTQIA people and other marginalized populations in Guyana. We also have a homophobia education program, which is about educating the general public and other key stakeholders in society to win hearts and minds to eliminate homophobia in all its forms as much as we possibly can. And our third program is a human services program, which is about researching and coming up with solutions to the most critical socioeconomic challenges that the populations we serve, marginalized groups in Guyana, face. And in some instances, we provide direct services, um, but we generally prefer the approach of advocating and working with government to ensure that those services are properly provided and reaching citizens in the long term, because we think that's a more sustainable approach. So,
Yes,
in a
and that's
nutshell, that's what we do.
great. And that's also very important, working with government to ensure that these services are provided in a safe environment. In respect to the law in Guyana, when you look at SASOD, how do you see SASOD creating that change?
Well, we've been doing this work since 2003, and we have a law reform agenda. Um, First of all, we think that laws that are discriminatory and still on the books need to be repealed. We have one major set that's left there, and those are the laws which criminalize same-sex intimacy. Specifically, sections 351 to 353 of the Criminal Law Offences Act, which has outlawed behaviors short titled as buggery, attempted buggery, and gross indecency. Um, the buggery and attempted buggery are gender neutral, so to speak, in the sense that it doesn't say, it doesn't speak specifically to the genders of the parties involved, but the gross indecency law in section 353 specifically talks about criminalizing all forms of intimacy between men, specifically men and not women, whether
Okay.
it's in public or private, whether it's consensual or not. And we think that is particularly problematic because, on a broad reading of that provision, one one can then say that same-sex practicing men could possibly be arrested for behaviors that don't actually amount to sexual intercourse, whether it's holding hands, touching, kissing, petting, and so forth and so on. But more importantly, we believe that, one, although there hasn't been direct use of the law in terms of prosecuting consensual behavior in
Yes.
decades, as far as we know, not since Guyana's become independent. Of course, these laws have been on the books. This last set, we could trace it back to the 1800s, right?
Oh,
So these laws have been on the books for a long time. These are inherited. We've inherited these laws from the British colonial period, and I think what's important is the indirect enforcement that is happening. And one of the ways that that happens, that we've recorded from time to time over years, is through extortion by police officers threatening to extort bribes. Well, extorting bribes actually,
okay.
for from men that they might find in a secluded area, in a public place like the seawalls, in a parked car on a weeknight. Um, we've recorded incidents like that. In some instances, they are friends. In some instances, people are on a date, but not engaging in any kind of intercourse or anything like that. And in all of those instances where that extortion and those bribes were extorted, people were not willing to go public. And people weren't even willing to go down to the police station and face being accused of this particular offense. So we always say that the charge really is the charge really is stigma. Stigma is the real
Oh,
charge, because in order for an offense like that to be established, more than likely, especially if it's consensual, the parties would have to give evidence against each other. So why would they do that if it was
yes.
consensual? But nobody
Yes.
wants to go down to the police station and be facing questions, possible arrest, detention for anything related to homosexuality, right? Because of the stigma attached to it. But also, I think the laws, having discriminatory laws on the books, reinforce the cultural homophobia that exists in the society, and it gives it a kind of institutional clout, so to speak. Um, the fact that, you have these laws on the books could possibly also be an impediment to having proper non-discrimination protections, which are needed to ensure that people don't face discrimination when it comes to accessing health services, education, issues around bullying in schools, employment, housing, all the socioeconomic services, right? Um, how do we make a case for comprehensive protection while we still have these discriminatory laws on the books, right?
That's right.
Mm.
So yes, and that's a very good point. So basically, I want to go back to the question that I was asking you earlier on, which has to do with Guyana being the only country in South America that still have this kind of discriminatory law in place. And the question I was about to ask you is, why is it that we haven't had political involvement for all these years, and what is different now?
Right. So Guyana has this, not only we're the only ones in South America, but now we're a minority in the Caribbean that still have these anti-sodomy, anti-buggery laws, which criminalize same-sex intimacy on the books. As many countries have gone to the courts and had these laws struck down by their local courts, starting with Belize as far back as 2013. And I think the most recent decision was this year in St. Lucia. The courts in Barbados, Antigua, and Barbuda have also struck down these laws, similar laws um, as well. So now we are a minority in CARICOM with them.
Okay.
Um, in terms of political will and political engagement, well, when we started this work 22 years ago in 2003, it started with engaging governments. The issue of the day 22 years ago was including sexual orientation as grounds for discrimination in the Constitution, um, which was a recommendation from the Constitution Reform Commission in Guyana. And that ultimately wasn't properly, I would say, debated, ventilated, or voted on. Um, but we recognized after doing that advocacy that there discriminatory laws that also need to be repealed. We've been successful at getting rid of the laws against cross dressing, and that took nearly 10 years. Because in that instance, the laws against cross dressing were actually being used to arrest people for cross dressing. So we were first aware, or we first became aware of a singular arrest in May of 2006. And then by February 2009, at least 7 people were arrested, thrown in jail, hauled before the courts um, in one weekend. And we recognized that these laws need to be challenged because they were actually being directly enforced. Um, and we ultimately got success at the final court, Guyana's final court, which is the Caribbean Court of Justice. And that decision came in November 2018. And what the Caribbean Court of Justice did is we won on all 5 grounds that we had claimed, and they struck down the law. They'd also said that this law, they're striking it off the books. So in effect, it was no longer there. In August of 2021, a year after the PPPC returned to government, they brought a bill before the National Assembly to formally remove the cross-dressing law from the books.
Okay.
Um,
And this what in what year again?
that was August 2021.
Okay, August
Yeah,
2021. Okay.
yeah, after they came back in office in August 2020.
Okay.
But I say all of that to say that over the last 22 plus years, there's always been engagement with government and political parties, specifically around elections. In 2020, for the first time, we did an LGBTQIA manifesto with about 15 demands.
Okay.
In 2020, we had 11, and we launched that. I remember us launching it in February. Elections were like March 1st or 2nd. We launched it in February, particularly around, I think it was around World Day for Social Justice, which is around like March 20th, February 20th, if I remember correctly. In 2020, we had 11 parties contesting, and we also had a town hall, and 7 of the 11 parties that were contesting the elections participated in that town hall. We did that. We did that town hall. I remember on Monday, February 24th, because February 23rd was Republic Day, and that fell on a
That's
Sunday, so the next day was a holiday.
yes.
And that was exactly a week before we went to the polls. And we thought it was a very groundbreaking forum for the Caribbean. And also, we noted that the 7 parties that participated in that town hall are the ones that were elected to go to Parliament in some shape or form,
Yes.
including the 3 that shared the joined seats. So you had the PPPC, APNU AFC as one party, so to speak, at the time, participating, and you had ANOG and LJP, I think the party with Asha Kisoon, right, and so on. So the 7 that participated. So we thought that this augured well for democracy, for governance, for human rights, that the parties that are willing to have dialogue on these issues are the ones that people want to elect to government, and to office and to the National Assembly. So what we decided to do this election cycle is to build on the success of what we did in 2020, which is something that we did for the first time. And we said we need to do this much earlier so it could have more of an impact, because the manifesto was probably only launched maybe like a couple of weeks before the elections.
Yes.
And then the town hall only took place a week before the election. And it also happened on a holiday, so there wasn't much media coverage. So he said, if we do this much earlier, it will have greater impact. And
Yes.
that's what we did this year in 2025. As soon as we launched our manifesto on July 16th, it was like 2 days after nominations day. Of course, elections was only called it was Independence Day when the president gave his address and called elections. It was May 26th.
Yes.
And that was a little unexpected, because the rhetoric coming from the government is that elections would have been October, November,
So
right?
everybody thinking that
Yeah.
they have some time,
So
right?
we were more prepared to do that kind of work in the last quarter of the year, and
Yes.
not so soon.
Yes.
But nevertheless, we were able to have our manifesto ready this time. 10 demands instead of 15. We noted that we had achieved one demand the government directly implemented from our 2020 manifesto, and that
And
was some.
in 2020, you had it was 15.
We had 15, and one was achieved,
Okay.
and that
Okay.
was
Yes.
to have to make pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is the HIV prevention pill,
Yes.
available in the public healthcare system for everybody who needs it, everybody who wants it. The pill was first introduced under the previous administration, by the coalition government,
Okay.
but it was only available to partners of HIV positive people. So you would have to know that your partner is HIV positive, and you would have to go to a clinic, where they only had about 10 doctors, because it was a pilot in Region 4. It was a public-private partnership. And you would have to go to these doctors and say, well, my partner is HIV positive, so I want to get on PrEP. So that we thought that was way too limited.
Yeah.
And to have proper prevention, people who know they're at risk should be able to go and access it. So
Of
that
course.
is one thing that was done very quickly when the
Okay.
PPC returned to office in August of 2020. By the end of the year, December 2020, they had a new HIV/AIDS strategy, in which they said very clearly that they were making PrEP available to everyone who wanted it in the public healthcare system, and you didn't have to pay for anything. You didn't have to pay for consultations with doctors or pay for the drugs or anything like that. And that was implemented by early 2021. You could have actually started to go to public sites around the country and get that. So what we decided to do is to um, look at what was outstanding, look at what the priorities are, and decided to go for 10 priorities, 10 demands. Um, Given that the experience that if we asked for 15 and there was only one achieved, why are we going with a whole longer list?
That's
Um,
right.
yeah. And, you know, even that was a difficult task because marginalized groups like the ones we represent and serve have needs related to health, education, employment, housing, all the whole gamut of services that everybody needs, right? So we did our best to kind of consolidate and prioritize what we think was the top 10 demands. And
Yes.
we launched that manifesto on February 16th. And by the end of not February, July 16th. And
Yes.
then by the end of July, we had the town hall. So over a month ahead of the elections. And I think that is why we've had so much more impact. It wasn't the first time that we were doing it, but I think we certainly learned from what we did before in 2020 and we did it much better.
Yes. What are those 10 choices that you came up with?
Right. So the first four priorities
Yes.
relate to human rights and law reform.
Okay.
We asked for this set of laws that we've been discussing, 351 to 353 of the Criminal Law Offences Act, to be repealed completely. They're discriminatory, they serve no purpose, they foster discrimination. We asked for the Prevention of Discrimination Act 1997, which is a piece of legislation that deals with discrimination in relation to the right to work. So it's
Yes.
only about one specific right, but a
Okay.
very important right, though.
And that
We
is for
asked
all genders.
and the right to work legislation, where we
Yes.
asked for it to be amended to include sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, so
Okay.
LGBTQIA people can be protected. In
Okay.
its current form, we don't think it has adequate protection. It
Okay.
has sex and gender there, but it does not have sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression as grounds. So we think that's very much needed. So we just asked for the definition section of discrimination in the law to be amended to include those 6 words, these 3 grounds, so that protection could be extended to this population. We echoed as well, and this is something that we have been calling for and recognize also, that there's also need for comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation, not just for LGBTQIA people alone, but
But
for
in general,
everybody.
yes.
Um, Bearing in mind that the Prevention of Discrimination Act is only specific to the right to work, but there's all other kinds of human rights like
Of
the right to
course.
health,
Yes.
education,
Yes.
political participation, and all of that, and so on. And
Yes.
there's no legislation, no ordinary legislation that protects people from discrimination where those rights are concerned. It's something that the United Nations Human Rights Committee identified last year in 2024 when
Yes.
Guyana went through its review by that body. And again, it was also identified earlier this year by the Human Rights Council, the UN Human Rights Council, when Guyana went through its universal periodic review. That would call for a whole new piece of legislation to be drafted from scratch because we don't
Which
have.
is going to be represented in every workplace, both public and
Yeah,
private.
and it would cover all the other rights and so on as well, right? Because in my cover was saying the Prevention of Discrimination Act is only about the right to work.
That's
So it
right.
would cover, it would be comprehensive and deal with everything.
Yes.
We also asked, and this is where our work started in 2003, that the non-discrimination clause in the Constitution be amended to include sexual orientation and gender identity,
Okay.
right? So those were the first 4 demands. They related to law reform. And then the others were in relation to policies, programs, and actions that the government could take in other areas. In relation to education, we are asking for a policy, a comprehensive policy against all forms of bullying and discrimination in schools, including anti-LGBTQ bullying, and for educators and school administrators and so forth to be trained to deal with this issue of bullying.
I don't think as a society we understand what that means because I know a lot of people would have echoed, well, okay, well, these laws are in place. So why should we have these kind of protection in school? And then I think probably about 2 or 3 years ago, we saw a video that surfaced on social media where someone was being attacked by another student. I think we could see exactly what was going on in that video. So that's a good thing that you guys are doing to ensure that individuals are protected in whatever way possible. Because as kids, they don't have the control to protect themselves. But then if
Right.
we allow others to abuse them and bully them in that way, but then it's something that definitely needs to be looked into. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And in fact, one of the things that we're doing right now to gather more evidence and to be able to do more policy analysis around this issue is we're currently conducting a study on anti-LGBTQ violence in schools. And we are interviewing teachers who have experienced this violence. And we're also interviewing former students, adolescents between the ages of 18 and 25 who have
Yes.
experienced anti-LGBTQ violence in schools. And it's a comprehensive study. We're talking to people from all across the country to have an in-depth understanding of the problem. So we're also trying to help the government by developing the evidence base around the issue and providing like sound research to be able to guide policy development in the area. So I think the main thing is we want to make sure like the school officials themselves are equipped to deal with the issues.
Okay. Yes.
So we want them trained, the school administrators, education officials, teachers,
Okay.
the guidance and counselors and so on, officers in school and so on, that they have the tools, the training and so on that they need to deal with those kinds of issues in schools. I think as part of the broader movement around sexual and reproductive health and rights and justice,
Yes.
we're
Yes.
also interested in seeing comprehensive sexuality education in schools so that children get the information they need at age appropriate levels to be able to prevent this kind of bullying from taking place in the first place. This is not the only issue around bullying in schools. Bullying happens on other grounds as well.
So many different areas. Yes.
Yeah. But I think the what they call the HFLE, the Health and Family Life Education curriculum,
Yes.
isn't comprehensive enough to deal with these issues. It needs a major overhaul and major revisions.
And I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and that needs to be done in age appropriate ways
True.
for children in schools. So
Yes.
we're very supportive of the local sexual and reproductive health and rights movement in the country that's advocating for that, and we've been supporting their advocacy efforts calling for comprehensive sexuality education in schools, which I think will also help to reduce this kind of bullying. And it's the same reason why SASOD has a homophobia education program. The crux of it is that education and educating people about sexuality will prevent hate and discrimination and stigma from happening in first place, right? When people are more educated on these issues, there's far less ignorance and hate and stigma and discrimination. So education is prevention as far as we see it. So that's an important part of it. So I think I covered like about six of the 10.
Yes.
Matt.
Yeah.
Another one in relation to the issue of housing, I think we prioritized calling for shelter, emergency shelters for LGBTQ youth who face any kind of violence in their homes and need to flee temporarily.
Yes.
This
Discrimination.
has been a vexing issue. Um, as the society evolves and people are coming out and so on to their families, sometimes there are generational issues. Older folks don't necessarily understand as much.
Yes.
And we've had to deal with many children and youth um, who are at odds with other family members and have to flee violence from their homes. And unfortunately, there's
Nothing in place.
nothing in
Nothing.
place. There's absolutely nothing in place, right? right? Some NGOs from time to time have tried to support, um, especially the youth over 18 with temporary shelter and things like that. But you can't do that with minors because
That's
there are
right.
laws against harboring children and all of that and so on.
That's
So
right.
you have to be
Yes.
extremely careful. You, even though you might be trying to help, you could get yourself in
In
trouble.
problems, yes.
Yeah. So we are saying to the government that listen, this is a governmental responsibility. You have to have
Yes.
systems and services in place for this. Um, in other areas, I am in relation to employment. Um, we were asking also for support, training, resources, and grants for people to be able to get job skills training, entrepreneurship training, and small grants and low interest loans to be able to start small businesses. So that will deal with the livelihoods issues. Um, and very important for groups like LGBTQIA people who have been historically faced a lot of discrimination. So there's a need for a bit of affirmative action to be able to lift those groups up from the kind of stigma and discrimination that they have been suffering for a long time.
Okay. So and all of these obviously is going to you see a lot of these present in a modern society, and then we see the administration speaking about a modern Guyana because there is so much to be done. How do you see the Ministry of Labor playing a greater role in getting some of these things implemented, as a matter of fact?
Well, I think in the current dispensation, the Ministry of Governance and Parliamentary Affairs is leading on
Okay.
um, the amendments to the Prevention of Discrimination Act 1997. I
Okay.
know that Minister Tashira has been working on that for a couple of years. I'm looking forward to getting an update on where we are, maybe as early as next month, because we have also drafted an amendment, a proposed amendment to the PDA 1997. Um, but in terms of implementation, because it's really labor rights legislation, it would fall under the Ministry of Labor.
Yes.
And I think some key implementation tasks would need to be undertaken in terms of like training the labor officers about the updates to the legislation and operationalizing the legislation and so on, because it's also like the title says, it's about preventing discrimination from happening in the first place. So education is key where that's concerned, and I know that they would do sessions from time to time with different organizations and different sectors. We have also gone to the Ministry of Labor before and conducted training with those labor officers. We would be grateful for the opportunity to do that again when the legislation is amended, so we know
Yes.
that they're updated on that. And I think we see ourselves as partners that we could work with them. Um, and we've generally had a good relationship with the Labor Department, being able to pass on complaints of discrimination when they occur. And the staff there has generally, over the years, since the 2010s, been very professional, even though there are gaps in the legislation itself.
Yes.
Um, I think people recognize that discrimination in any form of the workplace is inappropriate and should be sanctioned. I think the gap we can't fill without the legislation is when the discrimination does take place by employers in the context of work, we need to be able to take some of those employers who violate human rights to courts. We need to be able to take people to court and get justice for the people who are fired because they're gay. A hostile work environment is created because the person's trans. And when we are able to get justice in the courts, I think that will also serve as a deterrent to other employers
Yes.
um, that will think twice, certainly, before they commit those kinds of acts of discrimination in the context of work.
Great. And also with the atmosphere in Guyana, because we know we have the religious community and we have um, many different groups that may not advocate for this. And then also we have the issue that has to do with the Guyana police force as well, which those individuals are there to protect. Um, how are you? How do you plan to work with these other groups in terms of uh, in terms of providing a safe environment?
So one of the things we've been working with the police for a long time. The first time I did training with the police was 2013, the very, very first time. And we did the most comprehensive training, started doing more comprehensive training with the police in January of 2019. And that was a direct result of the Caribbean Court of Justice striking down the law against cross dressing in November the year before. We wrote to the police and said, um, given that this law has been struck down, we now need to sensitize all the police officers and work with you a lot more closely, build better relations between the police and our communities. And we were able to go in and do extensive 2-day trainings with police officers from all the regions, all the policing districts, right? It was hundreds of officers, but at the same time, the police force employs thousands, I think nearly 5,000 officers.
Yes.
So we recognize that this is going to be difficult to try to train every single police in the country, um, especially with turnover and issues like that. So
Yes.
where we are now, we're working very closely with the United Nations Development Program and the Ghana Police Force to develop training that is integrated into their curriculum so that when these new recruits go to the police colleges for 6 months, there's one in every county. The one for Demerara is here in Georgetown. There's one in Suddy, I believe, for Essequibo. And there's one around New Amsterdam for Berbice. We believe that the training on LGBTQIA human rights should happen there because that's the best place for it to happen, best place for people who are becoming police officers to learn. And in our experience, it's also much easier to train new recruits. I use the analogy that of doing training, of training both groups of people. When you have the officers who've already been in the police stations with a bad
It's really
work.
hard to
I describe it as like as
yes.
trying to fry a half-boiled egg.
Yes.
So
Yes.
sometimes you start off in some of those trainings with a lot of resistance
Yes.
from some of those officers, but the younger folks who have not gone into to the bad work culture and so on yet are far more open. At first, they might not always be taking it seriously, but as you get into the training, you see they become a lot more receptive, and by the end of day 2, it's a marked transformation. So we're saying that yes, this has to go into the curriculum.
Yes.
Belize has been very successful at getting it into the curriculum. So we're at the stage right now where we are trying to arrange a study visit. We already did one virtually, and we think it wasn't as impactful as we would want it to be. Trying
Yes.
to arrange a study visit for key officials from the Ghana Police Force to
Yes.
go to Belize and learn from their Belizean counterparts, another Caribbean country, a mainland territory as well, um, about how to integrate these trainings into the curriculum so that you don't have to always just trying to train people.
Now, there's a question I want to ask you. Do you think that Guyana do have a bigger issue when it comes to violence and bullying in general? Because I feel that's a conversation that we're not having enough, and the general issue and so forth. How do you plan to move forward? Because I feel there is a major problem right now that needs to be addressed immediately.
Yeah. So I think, yes, you're right. I think we don't have, as a society, we are not teaching our people, um, we're not teaching our people how to resolve conflict
That's right.
um,
Yes.
in non-violent ways.
That's right. Yes.
And we see it at all levels, the culture, the political culture, everything, the rhetoric and so on is very caustic, it's very violent. But I think too as well that we can't be convenient. with
That's
this language.
okay.
It can be convenient with this language of saying we are being bullied when we're not getting our own way, right? I think it goes across the board, right? It works across the board, and we have to recognize that from school, um, from community groups, from faith groups, and so on, we're going to have to do a lot more work at all levels of the society to teach our people how to resolve conflict. That's the root of it. How do we will have differences of opinion,
Yes.
right? But every differences of opinion should not always mean a threatening text message, um, a Facebook Live cursing somebody out, a press conference staring somebody down, you know, um, meeting somebody in a public place um, to fight or pull a weapon. There's just way too much violence in the society, and I see the government is was talking about civics education and all of that and so on. Um, but this is part as well of comprehensive sexuality education, right?
Yes.
It's about helping people to understand how to resolve conflict, conflict resolution, and all of that. So yes, I think that needs to be done at all levels. The school is always an important place to start
That's right.
because
Yes. Yes.
I mean, the saying is, what is the saying? You can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's going to be very difficult
Yes.
uh, to get some people out of
You
that
know,
mind.
I always ask myself because when you travel to the United States and when you travel to Canada and the UK and other places where you can't behave bad or in the manner that you behave back home, because a lot of them do adjust very fast because you can't do certain things in these countries because you're going to be locked up, obviously, and then you're going to be dealt with accordingly. Kind of mind boggling to see that. I think a lot of us we're not taking the time to learn from what we're seeing because, you know, we watch televisions. Everybody's on social media. There is so much information out there, but yet still we're seeing this constant fight, this kind of violence. And I strongly think I'm not sure if SASA could do anything about this in terms of getting people up to date in terms of how to deal with conflicts, because apparently a lot of it is started on social media for no reason. And then we have
Right.
persons who are basically celebrating violence, and it is something that that can definitely trickle down because now we are saying that if I don't agree with you, um, if I don't like you because you're part of the LGBT community, I can take advantage of you and bully you and these kind of things. And then now we've seen women also in respect to domestic violence, and everything is basically trickling down. It will happen to you, you know, to a family member or someone that you know one day. So I'm not sure if SASA is looking at the holistic view of things in
I
respect to
mean,
this.
when we do our human rights training and some of our workshops and so on in communities, we've started in for years now. We've been including a component on conflict resolution because we think people need those skills and people don't have those skills. But the truth is, Guyana's become a very lawless society, and this
That's
didn't
right.
happen yesterday. We've been on a downward spiral for a long time, and I think if all the stakeholders
Come together.
don't wake up
Mm-hmm.
and come together and realize we need to do something about it,
Yes.
we're going to end up with a country that might have some bridges, might have some roads,
Mhm.
but the social
Yes.
infrastructure um, would have completely decayed. We're going
Yes.
to be rift with inequality, violence.
Yes.
It's going to be very unsafe for people to live, no matter how much money you have, and that doesn't make any sense. What's the point of having this, being the fastest growing economy in the world if um, you can't even step out of your gate without
You
being
see,
at risk of a violent crime?
yes, and this is the type of conversation that I've been having over and over again. Because if we are talking about having a modern society, we need to understand what a modern society means, right? And protection is important. If we want to promote certain things, if we're going to change the laws in respect to, based on the topic that we're talking about right now, we have to start some way or the other to ensure that, like you rightly say, if you walk out of your yard, you don't feel unsafe in any way possible, right? So
Mhm.
um, it comes back to that real, to that real picture. But
Right.
like I said, I did plan to deviate a little bit, right? But let's go back to the topic at hand. So, in respect to your conversations with government right now, um, where are you right now with those choices, those options that you mentioned earlier on that you guys came up with? Where are you
Right.
right now with those
So
conversations?
um, now that elections are over, well, one, we were very pleased that the People's Progressive Party Civic um, included in its manifesto a commitment to enact legislation to protect people from all forms of discrimination, including on the basis of sexual orientation. A
Okay.
very express commitment, um, which we haven't seen before. Um, in our discussions with the other parties that have made it into parliament, um, I think I can safely say all of them express their support for legislation on non-discrimination. And I don't see any kind of difficulty if legislation to amend the Prevention of Discrimination Act 1997 being tabled to include sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. I think that kind of legislation will involve widespread support. I think
Yes.
that's a low-hanging fruit because it's a simple amendment. Um, I think we're going to have to help where it
Of
comes to
yes.
where it comes to the more comprehensive pieces of legislation. But
Yes.
because we don't have anything yet, and it's not an LGBTQ specific issue,
That's right.
because nothing exists,
Yes.
we're going to play our role in terms of mobilizing civil society. We're the founder and secretariat of a civil society coalition called the Guyana Equality Forum with over 20 something human rights groups in the country. So we're going to use that as a vehicle for advocating for the comprehensive anti-discrimination bill, which the country doesn't have.
Yes.
We know that there's a Constitutional Reform Commission. Um, I saw one person resigned. So I guess once Parliament is called, the opposition will have the opportunity to have that vacancy filled. And then
Yes.
our expectation is that Constitutional Reform Commission will begin to do its work and invite submissions from the general public, key stakeholders, and so on. And we will certainly be making a submission on including sexual orientation and gender identity as grounds for discrimination in the Constitution. We, the PPP, President Ali's won a second term. We are going to continue our dialogue with some key ministries that we work with. In some ministries, the ministers have not changed. So, for instance, governance and parliamentary affairs, Honorable Gail Tashir is still there. So we're going to continue that dialogue. And in some instances, there are new ministers that we need to meet with, bring them up to speed, bring them on board. So we've started sending out our letters requesting meetings, and I'm hoping that as early as next month, October, we will start to have some of these official meetings with government. But we would definitely like to see within this first year in office, and no later than that, the amendment to the Prevention of Discrimination Act being tabled,
Okay.
because this is literally a two-page amendment bill. We're literally just asking for the definition to be expanded to include three grounds, literally 6 words. So nothing difficult to do from a legal perspective, right? We recognize that the anti-discrimination bill, the comprehensive one, which doesn't exist, that's going to take some work. That's going to take some research, some mobilizing, and we as civil society are going to have to make sure that it becomes a priority for the government. So we're going to advocate for that, and I think we're going to do as much work as possible, maybe to prepare even our own draft and then
Yes.
share that with government um, for consideration.
Okay. And also with the level of education, in the country. Do you think that Guyana is ready for this kind of change in the legislation?
Oh, most definitely. And we have data to prove that because we did a national poll. We've done national polling twice. The first national poll on LGBTQ issues was done in 2013 by Caribbean Development Research Services, CADRES. And then in 2022, we hired R&K to do a second poll 9 years later. Where the amendment to the Prevention of Discrimination Act is concerned, that enjoys 72% of support from the population. 72% of the population believes that that legislation should be amended to protect LGBTQ people from discrimination. Just over 50% of the population, so homosexuality, have improved significantly over the 9 years that we measured between 2013 and 2022. Attitudes improved significantly over by 30 something percent. Positive improvements. So tolerance went up and certainly acceptance has gone up. Hatred of LGBTQ people is reduced from 25% to 12%, so more than a 50% reduction. Of course, we'd like to see that get to zero someday. But the point is that there is great progress that is being made, and the society is far ahead of the legislators on these issues.
Okay. And seeing that it's not a talked about topic amongst others. So obviously we have seen a society moving in a whole different direction, because when you look at social media, everything plays out on social media, on TikTok, on Facebook, and so forth. But it's just to have those laws in place so that persons can be protected. And in a modern society, I believe that we can achieve it. It's just that we need to take the necessary steps to ensure that these things are implemented and so forth, and the laws in terms of the criminal offenses and so forth, these things are being reinforced. um, and I know for sure people are not going to want to break those laws, right? Because living in a society where you know that you're protected in whatever way possible, right? I think people are going to have respect for the laws if these laws are enforced. Is there any reason why you're so passionate about this work in Guyana?
Um, well, I think I am because of personal experience. I think at the time I went to high school, many moons ago, there weren't a lot of resources available. There weren't organized groups and so on. There wasn't a lot of information out there. So as a gay person growing up in Guyana, I felt very isolated. Um, I felt very conflicted. And also in school, um, I didn't have the support of teachers um, that I thought I should have. And I think that's unfortunate that that happened, but also um, future generation of Guyanese children and youth shouldn't have to go through that. Um, at the time we started, SASOD, we were students, mostly at the University of Guyana at the time, and it was unusual to have young people engaging in debate and dialogue on national issues. And more so, this certainly wasn't the most popular issue at the time. So for a group to come out, a group of young people to come out and advocate for human rights of the LGBTQ people was novel, but I felt like it needed to be done, and that I didn't see a lot of other people who were going to do it, and I was seeing movements taking place in other countries. Guyana, Jamaica has its first LGBTQ group since the late 90s. We were only starting up with public advocacy in 2003. And, as the saying goes, somebody had to bell the cat, right?
Correct.
So,
Yes.
um, we decided to start a group. And when we did, we recognized that there was a role for everybody to play. Some people wanted to remain behind the scenes and do work, um, the research, the administration, the backbone work behind the scenes and not be visible. And others decided that they would do the public advocacy. So, um, yeah, I guess that's how.
I also believe that that is important. It is critical to have persons who are ready, and I'm sure in a society like right now in Guyana, I'm sure there are many others out there too who would love to collaborate and work with you. I'm not sure how many NGOs are in Guyana currently. I know a lot of them fell by the wayside. Have you been reaching out to those organizations to see how you can start the educational process?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a long focus. Like I mentioned earlier, we started a civil society network called the Guyana Equality Forum. We
Okay.
started that network in May of 2011. And it's still active. We still collaborate, share information, and engage in joint advocacy together. Because the common thread is human rights, and different groups are working on different populations and different issues. So we have groups working on women's rights, children's rights, domestic violence. We have groups working on rights of persons living with HIV prevention, indigenous peoples issues, the whole gamut of human rights issues in the Guyanese context. And I think that's been very important to have that civil society support. Certainly, it could be more visible, certainly, it could be strengthened. But that collaboration and that working together across civil society, I think, is pretty good in Guyana.
Great. And also, let's say, for instance, in removing the stigma, if someone wants to contribute in some way or the other, because you don't have to be gay or a lesbian or whatever it is to work with SASOD. Can you say something on that, please?
Yeah, for sure. If there's anybody that wants to volunteer, um, engage in any kind of project under our banner, we're always open to that. We see ourselves as a movement, and the movement is about people and people who come forward. Allies are extremely important in the work that we do. So folks could reach out to us by email at sasod@sasod.org.gy, or they could get us on social media. They could inbox us on social media if they can't remember the email address. And we're on all social media with the name SASOD Guyana. So we're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, YouTube. Every popular social media platform, we are there. We even also have a WhatsApp channel, SASOD Guyana. So I would encourage persons to follow our social media to learn more about our work. And they could also reach out to us on those platforms or by email at SASOD, SASOD, at sasod.org.gy. We also have a WhatsApp number, and that's +592 620 5088.
All right, good. Thank you. And also for the members of the diaspora, I'm from the diaspora, so um, how do you plan to get them involved? Because they're coming in with all of this experience that the government talk about, but you
Yeah.
need those individuals with the experience and the knowledge. How do you plan to get them involved with
So
SASO?
we actually have two diaspora groups
Okay.
right now. We have a SASOD USA diaspora group and we have a SASOD Canada diaspora group.
Oh, I didn't even know about that one.
Yeah. So we have not been able to start up our UK diaspora group as yet. That's our
Okay.
third target. But certainly anybody in the diaspora could reach out to us. We will connect you with our diaspora groups on WhatsApp. Our diaspora groups tend to focus a lot more on fundraising, being able to raise funds in the diaspora to support our work. So especially if folks are good at or willing to help contribute to that, they could reach out to us. Some of our diaspora supporters as well come back and do projects with us. And that's how we've been able to bring Priyanka, winner of Drag Race
Oh
Canada,
yes, well
to
yes,
Guyana in December.
familiar with
That is
Priyanka, yes.
through somebody in the diaspora who left Guyana as a child, and he didn't even come back until Priyanka came. So it's through those diaspora connections we've worked with many groups like Drag Academy out of Toronto. In the US, we've done work with the Caribbean Equality Project. We've also worked with DBGM Inc., headed by Guyanese Anton Craigwell, and we're always very happy to work with our diaspora supporters and counterparts. So I'd encourage anyone to reach out. We'd be happy to have those kind of partnerships, which are based on shared values.
Yes, exactly. And you don't have to identify in this population
Of
to
course not. Mhm.
basically support. But what about your funding? Where's the funding coming from for SASOD?
Well, currently our funding is primarily from uh, LGBTQ philanthropic donors, mostly in the US. We currently also have a project that is funded by the Canadian government that we partner with the Canadian HIV Legal Network on. They're the principal recipient of that funding, and we're a project partner in Guyana. And they also have a project partner in Dominica. It's a two-country project. Um, but we recognize that that as Guyana loses, or not, I shouldn't say loses, but as the economy grows, and we will possibly move off the ODA eligible list as early as next year, that we need to transform from primarily being supported by donor funding,
That's
and
right.
we're developing our social enterprises. And we are working on developing a LGBTQIA eco-friendly travel service to be able to facilitate LGBTQ people from all over the world and their family and friends coming to Guyana and having a safe experience and experiencing ecotourism in Guyana. So that's one of our social
Sustainable.
enterprises.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And the other one, which we had started before the pandemic, and we kind of now picking up the pace again, is our justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion trainings. We are able to do a whole spread of JEDI, as the acronym, JEDI trainings for corporates,
Yes.
organizations under the previous administration. The coalition government, the then Ministry of Social Protection, had hired us to come in and train the social workers and so on and so forth. So we're able to do this with different kinds of populations for fees. And those are the two social enterprises that we are very focused on, because we recognize that coming off of the ODA eligible list will make us, there'll be less funding available to us.
All right. Good. Great. And thank you so much, Joel. Do you have any final word for the current administration and also the opposition parties?
Well, I think all I can say is that we look forward to them keeping their promises, um, and we've taken those commitments that have been made publicly and in writing in good faith. Um, in Parliament, we look forward to working with. We always take a very bipartisan approach, and we look forward to working with all four parliamentary parties. Um, while we might start to engage the government in taking leadership on these issues, um, even the opposition parties can expect that we will come to meet with them um, to ensure that they will be supporting these progressive pieces of legislation that aim to advance human rights when they're tabled. So we look forward to working with everyone on all sides of the political spectrum in Guyana.
Great to hear that, Joel. And I'm sure Guyanese are going to be hearing your voice throughout the entire 5 year, because things are going to get busy in terms of advocating and working with these bodies to ensure that these laws, um, as a matter of fact, your goals are being implemented. Okay,
Great.
Joel, thank you so much for coming on this show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and you're welcome to discuss such an important issue. And don't be a stranger. We would like you to come back again so that we can continue this conversation we need to talk about. So, from time to time, I guess periodically, I'll have you come on and then we can continue this conversation, and so that we can educate the public. Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. So,
Cheers.
ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. This information is critical. If you have any questions or anything in related to this interview, you can always reach out to me, reach out to Joel as well, like you mentioned. There is this SASOD Facebook page. I'm sure you guys are going to go over there and probably flood the page now and follow, increase the following, and so that this information can be out there. So thank you all for listening, and we will be right back. This is News Guide 24 as usual. This is Dunstan Wilson, keeping it real, raw, and relevant. And remember, like I said, the tape never lies. Thank you so much.